The ACC has stepped into postseason play while the MAC has completed its bowl play for 2017 and 18. We bring in Steve Helwick from Hustle Belt to help us break down the Northern Illinois game against Duke at the Quick Lane Bowl in Detroit at Ford Field, with the Blue Devils moving on to a 36-14 victory. Steve, how you doing tonight?
I'm doing pretty well, Mark.
Yeah, Steve, so your thoughts about Northern Illinois. This is a game in which Duke scored 2 quick touchdowns to go up 14-0. It was tied at 14 after a couple long passing plays, put Northern Illinois back into the game, and then the running of Daniel Jones and the Duke offense seemed to take it away from there, and a stifling defense by the Blue Devils.
Yes, Northern Illinois really only had two possessions where they looked great in this game, and that was they were throwing those deep balls, and Spencer Tiers caught one, got a long gain, and then Trey Harbison ran it in for a touchdown from a little more than 20 yards out the very next play. And then that was after a block punt. And then they get another drive of just 2 plays. They run the ball, short gain, and on 2nd and 8, they throw a deep one, and this one goes to Juwan Wesley. And Wesley sheds off the Duke defender, gets a touchdown. It looks like NIU's gaining the momentum. They tied at 14, but then Duke has a possession. They fumble on and NIU can't recover. And after that failure to recover the fumble, there was not another good moment for the Huskies in this game. Duke punted shortly after. NIU just couldn't get that offensive momentum other than those two-play drives. And NIU really struggled earlier in the game and later in the game than that. There was a moment, I don't know, it's really blown up on the internet, this moment when NIU early in the game decided to go for a 4th and 18 from their own 11-yard line.
Yes, this was going to be my next point. Go to it, Steve, and then I'll provide my insight into this one.
It was a play. I just can't even describe the decision-making. I know it's a bowl game, last game of the year. Might as well try it. You play to win. And Matt Ferentz takes a snap, and he just seemingly throws it away short of the sticks. I just don't know what was going through NIU's heads there, because I know they tied it up shortly after that, but that was a free 7 points given to Duke by running that play. I could not believe that Rod Carey decided to go with a fake from there. I know BYU did something like that a couple years ago, but it's so rare to see a fake punt in that situation. And later in the game, when it's not completely out of hand yet, I think it was still 26-14 coming right out of the half, NIU runs a fake field goal, and they miss a lot of their blocking assignments, and the holder gets tackled right away before he can even throw the ball. So the special teams play, and 2 of those fakes were some of the worst decisions I've seen. Northern Illinois goes 0 for 6 on 4th down conversions, and they only punt 5 times, but they go 0 for 6 on 4th down conversions, which might be a bowl record. I'm not even sure. But I think those 4th down conversions were some of the key turning points in the game. But the fake punt and the fake field goal are 2 moments definitely to place your fingers on.
So, Steve, we'll go back to the fake punt. It was 4th and 18. I think you outlined this. Northern Illinois at its own 11-yard line. I don't recall if this is after the first Duke touchdown or even before there was any score in the game. Pardon me?
It's 7-0 at the time.
Okay,
Duke's up
7-0. Northern Illinois backed up at its own end. And you had made the comment, you play to win the game. This is play to losing the game. So in any time that there is a fake punt to be considered, one of the main reasons, and you know this well, in which football coaches go for it strategically on a particular portion of the field is because there's a risk and there's a reward. So you weigh the risk versus the reward. And if you're somewhere between the 40 and the 40-yard line, somewhere around midfield, yes, you are risking field position. Instead of punting and pinning the team, most likely your opponent deep in its own end, you are risking giving up field position, and they have a short field to kick a field goal or maybe score a touchdown, but they still have about 40 or 50 yards to drive the ball. As opposed to the reward is that you maintain possession of the ball and you've got a short field to get into scoring range yourself. In this situation, the risk goes way up. The reward doesn't go up with the risk, and that's typically risk-reward, is the reward goes up with the risk. The risk actually goes up exponentially and the reward goes down exponentially. If you pull this off, you are simply gaining a first down at roughly your own 25-yard line. You've ensured nothing. Basically, the risk is that you give up certain points, almost a 90% certainty that you're giving up points and most likely a touchdown, in which they did. And then the other portion to this, Steve, is that if it was 4th and 1, 4th and 2, 4th and 3, and you're asking, typically in a fake punt situation, you ask your punter to take off and run with it, not throw a pass, because then you're relying on your punter to throw the ball accurately, the receiver to catch the ball, be in the right spot. A lot of things have to work correctly to throw a football against a FBS Division I defense or special teams and complete the pass, especially for 18 yards in which the ball's being thrown 7-8 yards behind the line of scrimmage. You were counting on completing a 25-yard pass against a Division I defense. It makes absolutely no sense to try that play any way, shape, or form. It makes no sense to me. It could not be explained in any way, shape, or form to me how that was a good play call.
I know he was throwing out of his own end zone. He's back more than just 7 yards behind the 7 yards behind the line of scrimmage. He's throwing out of his own end zone, and he doesn't know how to throw. Right away, when Ferentz throws a pass, he throws it short of the sticks and out of bounds. Doesn't even come close. It was a free 7 points for Duke, and David Cutcliffe's team took that right away. I think Daniel Jones had a couple runs, or Sean Wilson pounded it in right there. And 14-0 at that point. NIU climbed out of the hole briefly, but they put themselves in a bad 14-0 hole by running plays like that. And then they couldn't convert on those 4th downs later in the game. The fake field goal wasn't too smart of a decision either. I know NIU's had kicking problems the whole year, but instead of just trying a fake because your fake special teams haven't worked in the past, why not just try to run an offensive play? Try to have Marcus Childers find Christian Blake or someone for a first down. I just think those would have been smarter decisions there. And like you said, with the risk and reward, the 4th and 18, you're just getting to the 29-yard line, and then you still have 70 yards to go for a touchdown. There's absolutely no reward in running that play. I thought NIU's play calling was one thing that really did the offense in this one and prevented them from keeping up with Duke's.
Steve Hillwett joining us from Hustle Belt to break down the Northern Illinois loss to Duke in the Quick Lane Bowl, which concludes the MAC season in bowl play at, I believe, 1-4. So before we continue with this, because I had a couple other points that I wanted you to expound upon, your thoughts about MAC play. We had you on before postseason play started. Your conjecture wasn't that the MAC would fare too well, but I would have to consider that the Toledo shutout loss to App State would be the one shocking and most disturbing loss for the league this season.
It definitely was. I was there at the Dollar General Bowl. There was shock almost everywhere. Toledo was touchdown favorites. I know it was a rematch of one of last year's games where App State pulled out the win in the Camellia Bowl. But this was a new Toledo team. They had Logan Woodside going for them, the whole offense. And the offense just went to sleep right away in that game. Woodside couldn't find anything. He threw a career-high 3 picks. Deontay Johnson, the receiver, he wasn't escaping App State's coverage. The Mountaineers defense did a great job. They were blitzing. They were covering receivers. They mixed it up with zone coverage, man coverage. It kept Toledo's offense guessing, and it was the first team really since the Ohio Bobcats to make Toledo's offense look bad this year. And then App State just ran it down their throats with Jalen Moore. Moore scored all those touchdowns, and I think he's had 3 touchdowns in the game, had over 100 yards. Taylor Lamb did a great job running the option. He threw long passes when needed be, and Appalachian State they built their lead just steady at a time, and it could have been much worse. App State only scored 3 touchdowns on 7 red zone appearances. So Toledo should be lucky they only lost 34-0. I know they've had a great season, 11 wins, but that was just as bad as a loss as possible for the Rockets. And you were talking about the MAC as a whole. When you're a conference, the number one team you need to have win is your conference champion. And that has been the MAC's biggest problem, is that their last conference champion to win a bowl game was the 2011 NIU Huskies. That's right. Since 2012, 13, 14, 15, 16, and now 17. 6 years in a row, the MAC champion has lost their bowl game. And a lot of times they lose it in embarrassing fashion, as we saw last Wednesday, I think it was, last Saturday at the Dollar General Bowl. But the rest of the MAC, besides Ohio beating a UAB team that was very outmatched, 41-6 in the Bahamas, the conference has struggled as a whole. Central Michigan couldn't keep up with Josh Allen and the Wyoming offense. I think they had 8 turnovers in that one, and you're not going to win any games in college football, no matter who your opponent is, with 8 turnovers. And then Akron, we discussed before that Akron and FAU, that wasn't really a fair matchup for Akron, facing one of the hottest teams in the nation, Lane Kiffin and those Owls. They fell 50-3 in a result almost all of us expected. So besides NIU, those were the MAC's 3 other losses, were Akron, Central Michigan, and Toledo. And none of them were pretty losses. They were all by very large margins. And it's bad that the MAC hasn't shown the ability to perform in postseason when conferences like the Sun Belt and Conference USA have some of the best records out of any conferences, not just Group of Fives. The one thing the MAC does have going for them, though, is they make the BCS in the New Year's Six Bowl. Sun Belt and Conference USA can't claim the same thing, so that's the one thing that keeps the MAC afloat. But they really need to have better bowl performances than 0-6 last year and 1-4 this year.
So one consideration in the loss today, 36-14, I believe was the final score. Yeah, 36-14 against Duke. Jordan Huff, running back, leading rusher for Northern Illinois, missed the game, 740 yards rushing, 7 touchdowns. Chad Beebe at wide receiver. He also contributed a pretty productive campaign. Let's see, 28 catches and a touchdown. Shane Wyman, also tight end H-back player, not able to suit up for the Huskies today. So they were missing 3 of their bigger playmakers on offense this afternoon.
They were also missing 2 of their guys on defense, Josh Corcoran from the defensive end position, and former first-team All-American, I believe he was, by one outlet put him first team, Shawan Lurie, who led the NCAA in interceptions in 2015. He's a great cover corner, ball hawk type player, and I think that did a lot on the defensive side too. But you mentioned the offensive guys. Then when you lose guys like Chad Beebe and Shane Wyman, you lose some of Marcus Childers' top targets. There were a lot of plays where Childers could have needed a couple yards and should have gone to a tight end, and you don't have a great tight end like Wyman out there. I think the running backs for NIU are sort of replaceable. They cycled through them all season long, from Tommy Mister to Jordan Huff, and they had Trey Harbison get the bulk of the carries today. But there was no running game at all, and I think a lot of that had to do with the offensive line just wasn't performing very well against that Duke front 7. And nobody on NIU had a really good rushing day. I think they were limited to about 65 yards rushing, and while Duke was running it all day with Daniel Jones and Sean Wilson and Britton Brown. But the injuries did hurt NIU in some ways. I think the defensive ones were key, because if you look at NIU's defense all season long, I don't think they even allowed 36 points. I think the most they allowed was 34 against San Diego State. And you see this Duke team that's scoring at will. They're getting easy first downs, passing and running. And when you lose a great pass rusher like Josh Corcoran on the opposite side of Sutton Smith, then you lose your best player in the secondary, a great corner, Shawan Lurie. And they also lost a great linebacker earlier this season in Kyle Pugh. And you have a lot of great defenders missing on a good defensive team. I think they were up there in the leaders for sacks and tackles for loss, and you didn't see many of that today. So the injuries definitely did hurt, but I don't know if all those players playing would have won the game. It just would have made it closer.
And Steve, when I projected this game, those were the games that I was looking at to try to make that leap from the MAC to the ACC, and you take one of the better teams in the MAC, match it up against probably the 10th or 11th best team in the ACC, and try to make that comparison. And you look at games like Boston College, only losing by a field goal at the beginning. And although that's the beginning of the season, you have to kind of make a consideration to how different are these teams from September to December. You still, excuse me, look at that game in particular. Nebraska's down, but they beat Nebraska 21-17. And you mentioned the San Diego State game, Aztecs, a formidable team that beat Stanford. and were a factor in the Mountain West, and Northern Illinois only lost that game 34-28. So I thought that they would fare a little bit better based on those three results against Duke, considering the Blue Devils were just a 6-6 club this year.
I agree. A lot of it is the fact that bowl games are just becoming unpredictable at this point. I mean, we saw Army take down that San Diego State team this week, but the MAC just hasn't been delivering. In Northern Illinois, they are a different team. They did not look as good at the end of the season. They had the loss to Toledo. That was bad. Their only 2-possession loss of the regular season. And then last week they blow a 17-0 lead to Central Michigan and end up losing that one. So this Husky team they digressed by the end of the season. And Duke was the opposite. Duke was progressing by the end of the season. You see Duke upset Georgia Tech and Wake Forest. I think earlier in the broadcast, ESPN said the FPI only gave them an 11 in both of those games and make a bowl game. You see a Duke team sitting at 4-6. Yes, I know they started 4-0, and they show the heart under David Cutcliffe to finish the season with a winning record. That's got to be impressive. And I think another thing that has to do with bowl games is coaching. David Cutcliffe is a fantastic coach. How do you know this? Because Duke had 3 wins or less in 11 of the 13 seasons before Cutcliffe came. Since Cutcliffe has come to Duke, in the last 5 seasons, Duke has made bowls 4 times. They've had winning seasons 4 times, and they've won 2 of those bowl games, something that Duke couldn't do before Cutcliffe got there. He's an excellent coach. He knows how to work the postseason, and I think that's something that Northern Illinois' coach Rod Carey has struggled with. We talked about the play calling that was bad for most of the season. Carey, I think this was his breakthrough season of finally shedding off. After the Jordan Lynch era, there's been a lot of questions about how Rod Carey was at Northern Illinois. And this season, he looked great for most of the year. Yes, his Northern Illinois fans often bash him for conservative play calling, and today he did anything but that. But I think the one thing that Carey does is he hasn't delivered in a bowl game yet. I think he's 0-5 in his career now, with his career in the bowl game starting in that 2012 Orange Bowl against Florida State. So I think another thing that you have to bring in when you go to bowl season is coaching. You saw Utah win today with Kyle Whittingham. He's 11-1 in bowl games. And I think that's one of the biggest factors that comes in predicting these. Yes, I know it's a mid-range ACC team versus a decent MAC team, but when the season's on the line, you never know what these teams have thought up in practice the past couple weeks. No, you don't see their opponent on their schedule since August, so you have to prepare in a lot of different ways. And I think that's one thing that Cutcliffe has the advantage on, and that's how Duke won by 22 points.
All right, so the Huskies finish up at 8-5 following the 36-14 loss in the Quick Lane Bowl to the ACC's Duke Blue Devils. Freshman quarterback Marcus Childers will be back next year after throwing 16 touchdowns against just 5 interceptions this season. And looking ahead, Steve, to Northern Illinois' schedule out of conference next season, this is brutal. This is one of the better schedules I've ever seen, or worse schedule, depending on your perspective. Iowa, Utah, Florida State, 3 of the first 4 weeks of the season. We're looking at, their non-conference slate going into next year. So a pretty stout gauntlet for Northern Illinois to break out in 2018. Wow.
You want to know the one reason, after I was talking about Rod Carey's bad bowl performances, why he's still there? He wins these games. He is 4-1 against the Big Ten in his career. That's very impressive for any MAC school. And I don't care if you're playing a bad Purdue team or Northwestern or Nebraska. Those are some other teams that he's beat, and Iowa before. He always delivers in these games. I don't know if he'll win one next year. Is that with Childers developing and NIU returning guys like Sutton Smith and having a lot of young talent, this team is definitely going to compete for a MAC West title. They were close this year. And I think this non-conference slate is going to help them in the end when it comes to conference play. Will they make a New Year's Six Bowl? With a schedule, in theory, if they won all 3 of those games, you'd have to throw them in, but they won't. Florida State and Iowa and Utah, that's way too much to ask for. It's one of the most brutal group of 5 schedules I've ever seen. But it will help them prepare for conference play. You see Toledo's losing Logan Woodside. Central Michigan's losing Shane Morris. This is the top MAC West team that's returning its quarterback. And then you have a really good defense and that's really going to help Northern Illinois compete for that MAC title and get back to that game in Detroit that they played in every single year from 2010 to 2015. So I think this will prepare them, and this will be a blessing in the end, but they will struggle with it at first, and it's going to be a tough ride for the Huskies, but they will be back in MAC contention, and that's something that's very important to the squad. It's a team that expects to compete for a conference championship every single year. There's some teams in the MAC like Kent State and Ball State that more just care about bowl eligibility. But after that run of success NIU had, anything short of a MAC championship appearance is a down year for this fan base. So it's something that they really need to see. And if they win one of those three games, that's great for them. They got that win against a bad Nebraska team this year. And who knows if Iowa or Utah or Florida State even will have another down year, and the Huskies can capitalize off of that.
All right, talking MAC football, specifically Northern Illinois, with Steve Helwick from Hustle Belt. Join him and the rest of the staff right there for the very best in MAC football coverage. Steve, we appreciate you breaking things down for us.
Thank you.